Are going to be having the first Dr. Stillman book review. If you don't know me, I love books and I love talking about health and wellness books. For those of you who are curious, I'm also on Instagram. Hello, Instagrammers. We are going to be talking about Testosterone for Life, one of my favorite books. This is the first book we're covering in Dr. Stillman's book club. For more information on the book club, go to my Substack, which is where the details are. So the idea with this book club is to have fun, to go over some really important topics, for me to unpack a lot of the health and wellness information that I see out there and make it really simple and accessible and explain it to you as a doctor. Not that I'm your doctor. I'm not practicing medicine via the internet, of course. You all know this, I hope, by now. But the lawyers make me say it anyway, and they charge me a lot of money just to tell me that. But anyway, we're going to talk about testosterone today because it's one of the things that's come across my radar as a clinician that's really important. And a lot of men are unwittingly low in testosterone, and they don't know about it because of all the craziness that's going on in the world with doctors being, let's just say, educated in such a way as will maximize pharmaceutical industry profits rather than optimize patient outcomes. You're picking up what I'm putting down. So without further ado, let's jump into the book. This book, for background, is by a guy named Abraham Morgentaler. A lot of people in the testosterone world will catch a lot of flack because it tends to attract a very specific type of person. And that person is a man who has previously been a high-performance athlete, or a woman who's married to or dating a man who is a high-performance athlete, very athletic, very fit, highly motivated by appearance and very specific physique that they want. And the reason that they get into it is frankly, out of self-interest. You talk to these people for long enough and you get them to really spill the beans, and they're like, well, my T was low and I was losing muscle mass. It was killing me. I just didn't look the same way in the mirror. And oh man, I just couldn't, satisfy my wife the way I wanted to. And anyway, so they get into it for that reason. That's given it a bad rap because people think that testosterone is just this vain, vapid, superficial thing. Oh, these men are just doping themselves up so that they can look good and have better experiences in the bedroom. That's not fair, frankly. And we need to have a better discussion about what testosterone therapy is, why it's important, why I often recommend it to male patients, and why I'm constantly screening for it in my practice. Constantly might be too strong a word, but if a man shows up and he's gained weight, he has lost muscle mass, he is experiencing issues with his relationships, he's depressed, he can't perform at work, anything like that, and I will go ahead and jump straight to testosterone testing. Because the other thing about it is the lab for me costs like $20. And for those of you who think about getting your own lab testing, you're overpaying for this testosterone test because they can get away with overcharging you for it. But anyway, so the reason I was mentioning all that is that this guy, Abraham Morgentaler, the author of this book, he is not just some random gym bro with an MD after his name. He is a board certified, Harvard trained MD, very accomplished, very widely respected in the medical field, has done an enormous amount of research. So this isn't just some left field opinion from some fancy wellness doctor who wants to prescribe a lot of testosterone. This is from a very conservative place where testosterone therapy has frankly been sidelined for a long time. And a lot of Dr. Morgentaler's career has actually been oriented around getting people to take testosterone therapy seriously and actually consider how we should be using it. And there's still a lot of questions out there that have not been addressed, in my opinion, adequately with the data on testosterone. More on that as we go through the book. But the point is, this is something that I think everyone should know about, because low T is going to affect someone you love, many people that you know at some point in your life, and you should make a rational choice about what to do about it rather than just blundering through life, potentially suffering terrible consequences, loss of employment, dissolution of a marriage, loss of your health, serious adverse health outcomes because you were not aware of a real medical diagnosis. Okay, so anyway, why did I decide to read this book or put this book first on our book club list? So as many as 20% of men over 50 years of age may have low levels of testosterone in their bloodstream, but only a fraction of this number have symptoms. As more research is done and low T is better understood, it is possible, perhaps even likely, that we will come to treat asymptomatic men as well. There is growing evidence, for example, that low T is associated with a laundry list of diseases that you don't want. Why is this important? Because we see in men, and I readily see this in my patients, that their testosterone levels kind of march down year after year, decade after decade. It doesn't matter if they're doing everything right, if they're doing sauna twice a day, or hyperbaric oxygen, or coffee enemas, or all the crazy stuff that my lovely patients love to do that is very extreme and out there for a lot of regular folks. The point is the testosterone levels will come down. What do you do when they come down? First, the question should be asked, what's the effect? What he's pointing out is that a lot of these men are not symptomatic. And one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is, should we treat men who are asymptomatic, who have low levels of testosterone? This is a really important question, because depending on how the data turns out, this could have a radical impact on the health of men and the behavior of men in our society for the better. More on that in a minute. All right. So what are the actual symptoms? Because the first thing you want to do when you're looking at a case, in my opinion, is you say, okay, well, do they have symptoms? Because if they really have symptoms, you should probably go ahead and ask the clinical diagnostic question right away. And this is one of the things about T that blows my mind, is that when I look at all the diseases that are potential, or symptoms that are potential symptoms of low T, I see lots of diseases that the pharmaceutical industry is making a killing treating with drugs. They don't make that killing with testosterone. Testosterone is not an expensive therapy. That's because it's a natural product, and natural products can't be patented. Some techniques for delivering natural products can be patented. Like if you invent the first and only testosterone, fancy thing that goes in someone's body somewhere. I can't say pellet because pellets already exist, but there's this pellet that is a delivery system for the drug, the hormone, that can be, they do a little incision on your buttock, they implant the pellets, they sew it up, and it secretes this hormone for the life of the pellet, which is usually like several months. And so the point is, if you can patent something like that, but you can't patent testosterone. That's very important. So what are the symptoms, right? Low sex drive, low libido, low energy. Now, low energy is something that all men, at least that I've met in my practice, experience as they get older. They say, I need an afternoon nap. I can't stay up as late. I can't go out and party as hard. I, can't keep my eyes open in the middle of the afternoon. I need more cups of coffee. Doc, can you give me an ADHD medication, whether or not it's appropriate? So they're having these symptoms of fatigue, and sometimes it's a lack of motivation, which is really interesting because they may say, no, I have good energy levels. But then you ask them about their life and what's going on, and that there's nothing really going on. And you say, well, what did you used to do? They're like, oh, yeah, I used to go out and shoot hoops. I used to go out and play soccer. I used to go out and play Frisbee. But now, I just like to stay home. I just like to sit on the couch and watch TV. Lord knows how many women I've heard complain that all their man does is watch television. It may be because he has low T. And I like the way that he talks about this. He had a patient who came in, and I like the way that Morgenthaler writes, by the way. It's a great book, very readable, very relatable. You can tell that this is a clinician who's talking about something to you through the book that he actually discusses with patients on a daily basis. And it's very nuanced. And I really like that because, particularly in natural and holistic medicine where I'm operating, there's a lot of people who don't put nuance in their books. They're just like, all of you need to take ashwagandha, and everyone needs to take maca, and all of you need magnesium, and none of you need, copper, and all of you need zinc. I find that to be very dangerous. Probably in the last 2 weeks, I've gotten levels of zinc back that were high, gotten levels of copper back that were high. And with testosterone, the story is the same. You can have high, you can have low. More on that later. All right. Anyway, in addition to low libido, the other main symptom that men end up with is erectile dysfunction. We'll talk more about that because there's more specifics there for us to discuss. And then men will lose muscle mass. This is very important. So decreased muscle mass as you age really has some profound metabolic effects. And many men will notice that they can't gain muscle the way that they used to be able to. It's not because their muscle's broken. It may not be because they're underloading their protein. It may simply be because they've got an actual endocrinological abnormality vis-a-vis low T. All right. Now, if you know anything about men's health, you know that all the symptoms I just described wind up being treated with pharmaceutical drugs. ADHD medications for lack of motivation, lack of focus, or even depression. Antidepressants, not to mention, and there's like so many classes of those, right? So antidepressants get thrown at men who have a low mood or unhappy or who are fatigued. You'll wind up with men taking things like tadalafil or sildenafil, so they're PDE5, I think, inhibitors that help with erectile dysfunction. Men who are losing muscle mass will frequently end up the things that keep company with that is weight gain. Not in addition to weight gain, they'll wind up with like diabetes. So you got to watch those metabolic changes and those metabolic parameters. And that's why you start talking to anti-aging wellness doctors about type 2 diabetes. We don't see a lot of it, and our patients don't have it for very long because there's so many different tools in our toolbox for us to use to make those metabolic dysfunctions go away that it happens kind of fast. Yeah. Anyway. All right. One of the other things is that's really interesting is that a lot of drugs that men are being treated with have sexual side effects that they end up treating in order to mitigate them with things like tadalafil, sildenafil, Viagra, things like that. Testosterone may be the root cause of both problems. So you can kill multiple birds with one stone, which is really nice. And no one's going to make a fortune off of it, which is why you haven't heard about it. Anyway. All right. What are we going to talk about next? The history of testosterone is really interesting. And this is the part that I thought was most relevant to this. So on June 1st, 1889, at a French scientific meeting, Charles-Edouard Brown-Séquard piqued the interest of the medical world as well as the public when he reported that he had I hope you're sitting down. This is weird. He had injected into himself an extract made with the testicles of dogs and guinea pigs. Wow. What a pioneer. Brave man. Okay, he claimed that this extract, soon known as, get this, the elixir of life, I can't make this up, increased his strength, appetite, and mental acuity, but he provided no data of any type to support this claim. You gotta love the history of medicine. It just cracks me up. Anyway, nevertheless, a new field called organotherapy was born, in which tissues and organs from animals or humans were injected into people with the anticipated effect of creating qualities in the recipient that matched the alleged qualities of the original tissues or organs. How about that? This guy wasn't just making this up. This actually worked. Testosterone in higher mammals is pretty much the same across the board. All right. What follows is basically just how they synthesized it and started using it. At the end of the day, testosterone itself is, and I'm going to make this very simple without referring too much to the book, but testosterone is the hormone that arguably makes men men. And it has a very complex secretion history over your life cycle, starting with when you're in utero. Even the in utero effects are what cause male babies to look like men when they're born and girl babies to look like girls when they're born. This is one of the reasons why the urologists are actually now paying attention to, thankfully, endocrine disrupting compounds, because they've noticed that male babies, particularly in developed nations where there's lots of technology and lots of plastics and lots of petroleum compounds and lots of endocrine disrupting chemicals, that the male babies have a higher and higher rate of congenital genital abnormalities. In other words, these young baby boys are being born with problems with their equipment that are, they're obviously not life-threatening, but you can understand why people would be upset about this, and they should be. And that's one reason why I think it's very important for parents to have an idea of what endocrine disrupting compounds are, how they may affect their children, how they may affect their fertility, and to try and minimize them in their environment. Again, this really ruins it really impacts the bottom line of very powerful vested interests in our country, which is why it's been kept under the radar so long. Very few doctors are aware of it. They're not having the time. They don't have the time based on the insurance model to counsel you all about it. It's why they're not educating you on it. But it's really important, and we'll talk about that and more in a different book club because we don't have time to cover it today. But that's what testosterone is. It makes men men. I don't want to minimize its effects on women, though, because testosterone does have effects on women. In fact, in recent years, as testosterone therapy has gotten more and more popular with men, it's also gotten more and more popular with women. You're using very different doses. Don't any of you get the idea that you can just go, grab a scoop of your husband's testosterone cream and rub it on yourself and have the same effect, because it will cause virilization in women, which means coarsening of the facial hair, more masculine facial hair, and more masculine features. One of the interesting things about the aging of the face is that part of the aging process is your face looks more masculine. Older people are more masculine appearing. Partly that's because of the long-term actions of testosterone, but it's also in women because of waning levels of female sex steroid hormones, estradiol and progesterone. So, but I digress. Women end up using testosterone therapy to boost their levels, not into super physiologic levels that will cause them to have virilization issues. They'll boost them into levels that will increase their libido because they want to make their men happy. Enough on that. All right. But there's a bunch of other things about testosterone that's important to understand. It's not just one molecule. There's testosterone, there's DHEA, there's DHT, that's dihydrotestosterone, and then they're all related to female sex steroid hormones. I'm not going to get into the hormone cascade. It's complicated. There are a lot of ins and outs. The enzymes that have different SNPs that cause them to have different speeds. So all of you, as I like to say, are special, and you, just like a special snowflake, you all fall and you all melt in your own special way. That means all of you are going to have a different hormone panel, and that's why it's not as simple as take testosterone or have more progesterone. That's a very simplistic and I think dangerously oversimplistic notion of how to do this. One of the things I want you all to understand about one of the conformers of testosterone is called DHT. It has 3 actions that are of great importance for men. This is very relevant for any man who's wondering about what to do about his waning testosterone levels. DHT has 3 actions of great importance for men. The first is that it is necessary for proper development of the male genitalia during fetal life. The second is that it is primarily responsible for prostate growth. And the third is that its actions on the scalp are responsible for hair loss or male pattern baldness. If you do not make DHT, some men do not, based on their genetics, present company included, they will not go bald. My father's 83. He has practically every hair on his head that he had when he was my age. Other men, you're doomed. I'm sorry, there's very little you can do. Make peace with your lack of hair and move on. Thankfully, higher testosterone levels do not appear to lead to the increased hair loss. So it doesn't mean that men who have male pattern baldness also have high testosterone levels. Those are not the same. They have higher DHT levels. They may have other factors contributing to it. Okay. One of the first medications that was made to stop male pattern baldness blocks the conversion of testosterone into DHT. That's very important because some people will tell you that after they stop taking finasteride, they felt terrible. That's called post-finasteride syndrome. I'll be honest with you. I've spent a fair amount of time trying to figure out what's going on in that illness. I have no earthly idea, but it's very weird what these men report. The reason I tell you all that, and this is a total side note, not covered by this book in the slightest, is that hormones have some kind of weird, almost spooky effects on people. And the interactions that they have with the cell membrane, you have to remember, happen on and not just the cell membrane, but the nucleus in the center of the cell where they're turning on and off transcription and regulating your gene expression. They're happening at a quantum level. And that quantum level is still a lot that we don't actually know. And what I want people to realize about that is that all of what I'm telling you is subject to revision as we do more research. And I'm really interested to see where the research on hormones goes with regard to cell membrane fluidity and really what we're learning about the quantum mechanics of cellular biology. Anyway, okay. Testosterone is an anabolic steroid. Now we need to talk about anabolic steroids because people get really worked up and they say, oh my gosh, you're on testosterone. Isn't that dangerous? Isn't that what those people use who got all that liver cancer or whatever? Okay. What is an anabolic steroid? An anabolic steroid is a steroid that will cause you to build muscle. Every single time you eat a meal that has a carbohydrate in it and you trigger the release of insulin from your pancreas, you just released an anabolic steroid. The guys who are powerlifting and abusing drugs to get to higher and higher weights, those guys are not just using testosterone. They're using things that are hundreds of times stronger than testosterone, and they'll be abusing insulin. Wow. Because insulin is an incredibly powerful anabolic stimulus and actually helps you build muscle. Now, it's more complicated than just insulin builds muscle. Otherwise, every diabetic would look absolutely ripped, and that's not what they are, generally speaking. Okay, anabolism is an overall increase in protein storage and production. Taking testosterone the way doctors prescribe it is not the same as taking anabolic steroids the way that powerlifters do. One of the reasons why we use testosterone only as creams, troches, buccal lozenges, or injections, or gels, is that when you use them as those forms, you're bypassing the liver. Ingesting testosterone through the GI tract puts it straight into the liver, which is supposed to filter the blood coming out of the circulatory system of the gut to get rid of toxins as well as hormones. Okay, and so when you do that and you eat a lot of testosterone or a testosterone derivative or a related thing or whatever, a lot of it gets just chewed up in that liver is what we call first pass metabolism. Okay, so that's what happens in the liver with testosterone. That's why we don't use it and eat it. That's why you're not seeing like big movements online to eat bull testicles. Liver King is selling liver. Liver King is selling heart, pancreas. Maybe he's on the testicle train. I don't know. Maybe he's going to be, recommending Rocky Mountain oysters shortly, but I haven't seen that yet. And if he does, there will be real questions about how much of a dose you're going to get, because you could reach levels, from what I understand, that could actually have physiological outcomes or impacts. If you imbibe too much anabolic steroid, it can contribute to things like liver cancer, which is why we don't use them this way. It's why we really discourage bodybuilders from abusing these drugs. But reasoning with them is it's difficult. Okay. A lot of men decide that they don't want testosterone because they don't want to take a steroid. That's okay. There's other options for them. We're going to talk about those a little bit later too. All right. One thing for men to know about testosterone is when you use testosterone itself, what ends up happening is that, sorry, lost my train of thought. When you use testosterone itself as an injectable cream, a gel, troche, whatever, what ends up happening is you're reducing the amount of testosterone being made in your actual testicles. This results in a lack of sperm production and maturation, because the testosterone has to be made locally for that to actually happen. Okay. If you do that for too long, the testicles will get small and they'll get soft, and men will sometimes have reduced ejaculatory volumes. That means that for young men, high testosterone administration can cause infertility. For those men, we need to use drugs if we need to boost testosterone for some reason, that are going to stimulate the testicles to actually naturally increase their production of testosterone, not just pushing testosterone into the system. As men get older, the testicles seem to get lazy and not produce as much testosterone. I have to tell you, I wonder if that's nature's design to kind of get the old men to stop being in charge, because sometimes old men have terrible ideas and they're not adaptable. They're set in their ways. They don't adapt well to new ideas. They don't incorporate new ideas well. I really wonder if that's why the testosterone levels really sort of peak in the late 20s, early 30s. Those are the men who seem to be driving, and not just men, but women who seem to be really transforming society with really smart, interesting new ideas and so on and so forth. All right. Somebody asked on Instagram if I recommend DHEA supplements. That's a loaded question, but I like it. But there's a lot of caveats to it. There is a Q&A for paid subscribers after. I'm going to go ahead and answer that in that Q&A. If you want access to that, you can join my Substack. Love to have you. There will also be a recording made available to the members as well. Okay. And if you're not following my Substack, you should be, because it's awesome. Lots of really fun information over there that I can't really put out on lovely social media platforms like these ones where we get schmencered. All right. Anyway. One of the ways that testosterone is important as a developmental hormone is that during fetal development and also shortly after birth, there's a transient surge in testosterone in boys, but not girls. Among other effects, it is believed that this rise in testosterone, even before birth, imprints the brain to be more boy-like. Notice that he said the brain. I already alluded to its effects on testicular maturation and development. If he's correct, which I'm confident he is, this means that your boy's and or a man's behavior is being wired even before he's born. This has implications for levels of criminality in the population, which, spoiler alert, are not actually linked to testosterone levels. They're linked to other problems that actually interfere with testosterone's normal action. So the whole testosterone makes men violent thing really seems to be a bunch of fear mongering by people who are really misinformed. Where was I? Right. If this is true, it implies that reducing or interfering with testosterone's action on the male on the male fetus. Because I really wonder if this has like changes in women as well. And with women, obviously, it would be their estradiol and their progesterone, which are the complementary hormones for women, right? So if with endocrine disrupting compounds, which are chemicals that disrupt these hormones, they are interfering with normal development of sexual function and also sexual behaviors that are wired into the brain, we may infer that endocrine disrupting compounds exposure in utero is literally, how should we say, making women less feminine and making men less masculine. And I think we can all agree that we're seeing a lot of that these days. All right, enough about that. Testosterone and the brain. When tiny amounts of testosterone were placed in specific areas of the brain that control sexual behavior, male lizards resumed all their normal sexual behaviors. What that means is that the sexual behaviors of men are not dependent entirely upon neurotransmitters other than testosterone. With sexual behavior, you're going to hear a lot of things about dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine and epinephrine. All that's really important and relevant. And so are things like DHEA and cortisol and all the other hormones. But with testosterone, what we're seeing in this experiment is they're proving and demonstrating that testosterone has this effect on different areas of the brain to change male behavior. They do a bunch of different things like this with female lizards as well. And this is even though blood levels of testosterone were undetectable. What that means is that it's specifically the action of the testosterone in the brain, not just circulating levels. This becomes very relevant later on. All right. Paula asks, an ingested glandular supplement like a desiccated organ may not be as beneficial because of the first pass metabolism within the liver. That is correct, Paula. But only for things the body identifies as toxins or hormones. So taking, for example, beef liver, the body's not going to destroy the vitamin A or the copper in the beef liver. It's going to absorb that. Let's say, steroid hormones that may be found in trace amounts in the beef liver will be detoxified. All right. Another really interesting fact from these lizard studies that he throws in is the effects on female lizards. The female lizards only allow themselves to be caught if they're sexually receptive, if they've had their ovaries removed, resulting in low hormone levels of their female sex steroid hormones. They become unreceptive. This is a really interesting question to be asking in light of the impending population collapse in the world, because it implies that endocrine disrupting compounds may actually dramatically reduce female sex drive, which also makes me wonder if the demand for testosterone replacement among women today is in part due to the effects of endocrine disrupting compounds reducing the efficacy of their native natural female hormones. Okay. One of the best known effects of low testosterone, and this is the effects of testosterone on sex that are very relevant, because this is what most men who end up getting found to have low T because they're asking about it actually show up with, is the effects on their sexual function. So we've known for centuries that castrated men, that means men who've had their testicles removed, lose the ability to have erections whatsoever. This means that men who are struggling with erectile dysfunction may have a testosterone deficiency, not, as you would be led to believe by pharmaceutical company marketing, a tadalafil or sildenafil deficiency. Okay, this is why I start screening for it in men, really way before the ages where it's super low. All right. The effects of testosterone on muscle are very important to talk about. The effect of testosterone on muscles explains in part why the average man is stronger, runs faster, and has greater muscle definition than the average woman. Hopefully, we're not at the point where that will get me canceled from these social media platforms. Send me a like if you know what I'm talking about. All right, there's an important distinction, and I alluded to this earlier, between the abuse of steroids and the medical use of testosterone to treat men with testosterone deficiency. The goal of T treatment is physiologic replacement and restoration of testosterone to normal levels in someone who has too little. In contrast, athletes and bodybuilders take steroids at levels that are many times higher than the highest T levels ever found in normal men. I mention this passage for two reasons. One, understand there's a very big difference between the dose of testosterone that a doctor is going to place you on to treat low levels of testosterone and the doses that bodybuilders are taking. We already talked about that earlier. But the other thing is that all we're doing is shooting for what we call physiologically normal values. This is actually a really nice and very technical way of saying we're just trying to make you normal again. We're trying to restore the levels of this hormone that you had when you were 20, 25, 30. We may not even shoot for that. We may shoot for a level like in the 600s or 700s, which may be more commonly found in the late 30s. Men in their 40s are frequently around the 500s or 400s or even lower, depending upon their state of overall health. But our goal, again, not to push you to some crazy high, really just to put you into the normal range. I will tell you, I believe there's a place for using supraphysiologic doses of hormones. I'm not going to get into that here because particularly with testosterone, you can run into some issues. But I've heard patients tell me they got a good outcome with that, and I've heard doctors tell me the same thing. I don't think it should be done lightly because when you push someone to those supraphysiologic doses, it's frankly unnatural. But I really think that people worry a lot about using high doses of things. When you're doing it for a short period of time, you can frequently get away with it with no detectable adverse events or outcomes. But it has to be done in a targeted way. Okay, testosterone and fat. This is real simple. Men who have lower body fat percentages have more testosterone. How about that? Now, is this a chicken or the egg thing, right? Do the men with less body fat have more testosterone because they have less body fat and the body fat aromatizes it to estrogen? Or do the men with higher testosterone keep off the body fat because of testosterone's effects on muscle and fat burning and adipose tissue and all that other stuff? God only knows. What I care about is correcting all your physiological imbalances and nutritional deficiencies and imbalances and issues underneath all this, and then using testosterone judiciously in physiologic doses to get you to some semblance of normal biochemistry, and then things come into balance. Testosterone and bones. Very important for people to understand that all the hype about osteoporosis, what they're really missing is the effects of hormones. Hormones have a profound effect on bone metabolism. Trying to build healthy, strong bones without adequate levels of hormones is like trying to build a house without mortar. When you go back and you read the old school literature from anti-aging doctors back in the 70s, 80s, even earlier than that, they talked about using low doses of progesterone and having no further issues with osteoporosis in their practice. We're going to be covering those books later. It's kind of controversial in the sense that the studies were small. They weren't all that well controlled. Spoiler alert, it's because none of these medications are patentable because they're all natural. That means no one's going to make a killing on it. It's very hard to come up with an artificial delivery system that's going to make anybody a lot of money. And so the pharmaceutical industry makes an absolute fortune on their osteoclast resorption inhibitors. Yeah, I don't even remember what they're called because I never use them in my practice because there's so many better ways to build bone than these drugs. But they're making so much money on these drugs that it's like all doctors know to use. It's so sad, but it is what it is. Anyway, so listen, testosterone, critical for healthy bone formation. That means you can use testosterone judiciously in order to boost people's levels in order to improve their bone density. All right. Last part of this chapter, which is testosterone and your health, putting it all together. What really struck me when I started doing this work was how much men improved when they responded to testosterone treatment. Although the primary reason men were referred to me was for some form of sexual dysfunction, usually erectile dysfunction or low libido, one of the unexpected rewards was hearing so many of my patients tell me how much better they felt in ways that had nothing to do directly with the symptoms I was treating. How about that? Okay. Their moods were better, their partners found them less irritable, their workouts at the gym were improved. Often they felt more motivated, brighter, and energetic. Okay? Although I warn my patients who are about to begin T treatment that they may not feel a dramatic, sudden change like a light switch being turned on, the general improvement is often obvious to those around them. It also may take a matter of weeks or months for this change to manifest. Testosterone is not something that you just start and see an immediate response to. It is something that you can use, and if you dose it correctly and you get the levels up to adequate, you get adequate increases in your circulating levels, you'll see people responding over a matter of weeks. And those effects can compound over months. All right. Chapter 3, could you have low testosterone? This is really important because, all of this background information is well and good, but it's much more important for us to say, what's the magnitude of this problem likely to be? How likely is it for a man to have low testosterone? When I was trained, I didn't appreciate how common it was. And even when I heard how common it was, I don't think that it really, got into I didn't start testing for it. A big part of that is the bias in the people who trained me. There's still a lot of bias in the medical community not to test for testosterone because their first thought is, the patient's depressed, antidepressant. Oh, the patient has erectile dysfunction. Oh, Viagra. Oh, the patient has got lots of fat and little muscle, gym, right? Or maybe some kind of weight loss drug. Or some kind of anemic diet and lifestyle or dietitian referral, whatever. Testosterone can address all of those if the issue is a low testosterone level. How about that? Okay. What is low T? This is where I want to start with this chapter because it's a really interesting conversation to have. The reason for making a distinction between a blood test result showing low levels of testosterone and the condition I call low T is that not all men with low blood levels of testosterone need treatment. At least with our current state of understanding, there is no solid proof as yet that we should treat them. Okay? One of the primary principles in medicine is that we only intervene or treat people when we have reasonable expectations that we will improve their lives, prevent disease, or increase their chances of survival. In general, we refrain from treating people for whom there is no known or proven benefit from the therapy, even if they have a symptom or a test result that is abnormal. What does that mean? Okay? Just because you see a low level of something does not mean that you have any business giving that person more of that stuff. You have to ask the question, why is it low? One of the things I'm constantly impressing upon patients who have low hormone levels is, hey, you have run out of gas in the tank. Could it be because you're running the car too hard and trying to go too far too quickly? There's an epidemic of low thyroid hormone, abnormal female sex steroid hormones, low testosterone. I'm convinced in people who are working too hard, not having enough fun, don't have a positive outlook on life, and have just got a really difficult set of personal circumstances that are creating an environment and a set of signals to their body that hamstrings their hormone production. That doesn't mean we don't treat these people with hormones. It means we try to figure out what they're doing that's getting them the result that they have. This is a big hole in the literature, if you ask me, because while I have all this fancy data on low T and what the levels are and how people respond and blah, 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 I have no idea. And I've looked, believe me, I've looked for the literature showing, artificial light at night reduces your testosterone level by 58 or 75, points on average or something like that. I have no way to quantify what these things are. We just know that, for example, some men who work the night shift will see their testosterone levels drop and they'll need T therapy, or they'll need to quit the night shift and improve their sleep and wind up with a normal T naturally. I have seen men with poor sleep, even in youth. We're talking like a 20-year-old that I'm thinking of right now, presented with a very low testosterone level. And I think it was because he had very poor sleep. Anyway. All right, several studies over the last few years have shown that men with low testosterone had substantially higher mortality rates than men with normal testosterone levels, okay? This doesn't necessarily mean that those men with low testosterone levels would have lived longer if they had received testosterone therapy, because that possibility wasn't tested in those studies. It is possible that the low testosterone levels may have simply been an indicator that those men were more likely to have serious illnesses. This is very important, okay? The conclusion of lower testosterone, higher mortality does not mean that giving those men testosterone is going to reduce their mortality. This is a logical jump that a lot of people make, which is not necessarily going to be the case. We have to ask better questions like, why is the testosterone low? Are the men who have low testosterone doing something that's making their testosterone low that we can stop them from doing so their testosterone will rebound? Such that even if we were to replace their testosterone to normal levels, it won't change the negative effects of the thing that they're doing, like, for example, sleeping poorly. All right. At this point, I recommend testosterone therapy only for men with low T. We're going to talk more about what he means by that as we go on. When it comes to diagnosing low T, most texts and experts focus primarily on the blood test results. I take a different view. The emphasis should be on symptoms. Every week in my office, I see happy patients in follow-up who have responded beautifully to testosterone therapy, but who had been previously told by another physician that they couldn't have the condition because the physician incorrectly believed the lab results were normal. We're going to talk about the reference range for testosterone in a minute. But what this means is that many men will not have normal what's the word I'm looking for? They'll have symptoms of low testosterone at levels that are normal, and this is where defining the normal becomes very important. One of the interesting graphs on this in this book is on page 43, and it shows the way that low total testosterone levels come up along with low bioavailable testosterone levels as we age. But there's a big discrepancy. Low bioavailable levels of testosterone become more and more and more and more common as men get older. Why is this an important distinction? You really should know a little bit about testing for testosterone. Man, woman, child, well, maybe not children's a little over their head, but no matter what your age, no matter what your gender, understanding how hormones work in the blood is really relevant to your health, because I see a lot of people with normal hormone levels, men, women, estradiol, progesterone, thyroid hormone, testosterone. They think their level is normal, but it's not about what's circulating in the blood. It's about what's available to interact with the receptors in the cell membrane. The body produces these hormone binding globulins, like thyroid hormone binding globulin and sex hormone binding globulin, that will bind to these hormones, and it uses that as kind of a buffer. So if it needs to release more hormone, it will degrade some of the protein, and then the testosterone or the estradiol or whatever will come off of that degraded protein. It'll do its magic, right? And then it can also increase levels of protein and bind up that hormone. The body uses this as a way to buffer, I believe, things coming in from the GI tract that it may not be able to control, which is why I measure it in patients when I'm looking at their hormone levels, okay? When you do a hormone level, you're not asking how much is free or available. This is like asking how many cars you have instead of asking how many cars you have that the engine will turn over and the wheels will spin, right? You're not in good position if you have like 4 cars that are in the shop. You still can't get to work. You need another set of wheels, okay? The number of men with low testosterone, only 5% of the men with low testosterone get treated. I'm not telling you all to run out and see a low T doctor, and I do offer testosterone replacement therapy to my patients. But I am telling you that you should educate yourself on this issue and make a rational, logical decision, because it will have a significant impact on your health and your well-being, and potentially many other parts of your life, your job, your relationships, all these other things in the long term. All right. So 4, what you should know about being evaluated for low testosterone. All right, total T, as I mentioned before, can be a useful test, but in many cases it is terribly misleading. This goes back to what I was just saying. And the sex hormone binding globulin is what's binding up testosterone to prevent it from working. Because sex hormone binding globulin increases with age, total testosterone becomes less reliable in older men, which is the very age group at greatest risk for having low T. That's why I measure this free testosterone and then total testosterone. And he says, actually, and I quote, "The total T test should not be entirely dismissed because it does help guide your therapy." A number of tests have been used to measure free T, but there has been so much controversy over the quality and interpretation of these various tests that many community physicians have given up on free T and depend primarily or exclusively on total T. This is a shame because free T is the best test to determine if a man truly has low T, and may well be the best test that we use in order to judge whether or not we're giving them the right dose of testosterone. More on that later. How can I tell if my testosterone levels are low? The average concentration, let's talk numbers, right? of total T in men over 40 years old is approximately 450 nanograms per deciliter and is somewhat higher in younger men. Among healthy younger men in their 20s or 30s, it is uncommon to see results that are lower than 350 nanograms per deciliter or higher than 800 nanograms per deciliter. However, testosterone concentrations decline with age beginning in the mid to late 30s by approximately 1% per year or 10% per decade. If we use the lowest level seen among the 20-year-olds as the bottom value for what we would consider normal, then approximately 10% of 40-year-olds, 20% of 50-year-olds, and 30% of 60-year-olds had reduced levels of T. A very simplistic way of thinking about this is, do you want to be 20% of the man you were at 20 or 25 when you're 50, 60, 70? A lot of men don't seem to have a problem with that. Some of you may. Dr. Salome, this is Testosterone for Life, Abraham Morgenthaler. All right. Where was I? What is a low level of testosterone? There is no consensus as to what level of testosterone should be considered low and therefore merit a trial of treatment. In a set of guidelines published in 2006 by the well-respected Endocrine Society, the authors of the guidelines wrote that it is impossible to find a single testosterone value that reliably separates men without symptoms of low T from men with symptoms of low T. Yet to provide some guidance on this issue, the authors chose the value of 300 nanograms per deciliter as their threshold, coinciding with the value used by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to define testosterone deficiency. Let's remember who all these people are. They're very, very closely tied to the pharmaceutical industry that will never make any significant amount of money off of testosterone replacement therapy. So do you think they have a profound conflict of interest here? I would say that they do, and this means that I'm not particularly interested in what they think about your normal testosterone levels really ought to be. I'm quite certain that it would be best if they were higher than that. We can have the discussion about whether 90-year-olds or 80-year-olds or whatever need testosterone replacement therapy, maybe another day. Okay, and then Morgenthaler goes through this intellectual exercise of, if your testosterone is like 299, do you get testosterone replacement therapy to put it up above 700? But if it's 301, right, you're like disqualified. I think that's very silly. This is one reason why I am just nauseated by the conventional model of medicine where the insurer gives me like 10 minutes to talk to this guy about this therapy that's really requires a complicated dosing schedule, has possible side effects, has to be educated on how we're going to use it. And so he doesn't, give his wife his testosterone by, unintentionally like rubbing it off on her when she hugs him. I mean, it takes time, right? We don't have time with patients in the conventional insurance model. So fire your insurance company and have a healthcare sharing ministry and then have a doctor who works outside of that system. But anyway, low T is unlikely for total T values above 400 nanograms per deciliter. Low T is definitely present if testosterone is below 200 nanograms per deciliter. You're not going to find that very often. Those men, very, very old, typically, and they often have contraindications or reasons that you got to be careful with testosterone. Okay. In my practice, free T concentrations below 15 picograms per milliliter are considered consistent with low T when determined by the analog free T test. That's the one that's most often ordered when the physician orders this. There are different types of free T testing. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of that because I didn't think it was interesting enough. Most docs are going to run the this one that he's just talked about. All right. We are running out of time because we're going to wrap this up at 8. Benefits of testosterone replacement therapy is 5. Treatment for low T levels. I'm not going to go through the treatment options. If you're interested enough, I recommend you get the book and go along with that. Testosterone and prostate cancer is a really interesting chapter in this book. If you have specific concerns about that, I recommend that you get the book. I recommend that you read it. Morgenthaler's pretty much written the book, pun intended, on this subject. He's included it in this chapter. Risks, side effects, and medical monitoring. I'll be honest with you, if you're going to do this with a doc, they should have a good, robust clinical practice on this, and that you shouldn't need a webinar on this to tell you how to do that. And so we're just going to go ahead and jump into the future of testosterone. There have been so many concerns, myths, allegations, and scare stories about testosterone that the majority of what has been written and studied has been to determine whether testosterone is risky or safe. This emphasis on the potential risks or shortcomings of T therapy has distracted us from a larger question, namely, is a normal T level conducive to good health? The short answer appears to be a qualified yes. The most important question about testosterone is this: are men on T therapy healthier than untreated men with low T? One of the sticky points in addressing this issue is how health is defined. For most of my patients who have responded nicely to T therapy, it would be a no-brainer to ask them whether they feel healthier. Doesn't improvement in sexual function, energy, and strength represent better health? Yet from a broader perspective, the term health has little to do with symptoms and more to do with objective results that can be measured. When experts look at the effects of various lifestyle or medical practices on health, they often look at the effects on longevity and on the diseases that, in developed nations, are the most common causes of premature death: cardiovascular disease, heart disease and stroke, cancer, etc. How does having normal T levels stack up using this type of definition of health? Okay. To tackle the toughest issue first, testosterone has an interesting relationship to longevity. At least 4 studies published over the last several years have shown that men with high T levels appear to live longer than men with low T levels. Again, as I discussed earlier, this does not necessarily mean that if you just dump or inject T into men, they will live longer. I would love it if it was that easy. He then goes through the data on testosterone, cardiovascular disease, all this stuff. What's going to be necessary to actually answer this question are large trials where they take men who are treated and men who are untreated, they follow them long term, and they demonstrate higher mortality in those who are untreated with low T levels. Because that substantiates that the administration of the T reduces all-cause mortality. That's where we should really be addressing our focus, is all-cause mortality. One of the big things people scaremonger over with testosterone therapy is they say, well, if you've had prostate cancer, or you might have prostate cancer, you're at risk of using T therapy because it'll make the prostate cancer grow. Morgenthaler debunks that in this book in great detail. The urologists are catching on. The general practitioners are behind them. Most of you are going to be seen by a general practitioner for something like this in all likelihood. And so it's worth you knowing that. Again, we have lots of evidence to suggest that testosterone replacement therapy is going to prolong life for men. To my knowledge, the definitive study has not yet been done, but you also got to remember this book is about 8 years old. I picked it not because it's old, but because it's frankly like a very definitive work on this topic. And I really think that no one's better. He's got impeccable credentials and really, I think, does a nice job of being very academic about it, which I like. Okay, these pieces of evidence do not yet mean that T therapy will reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease, but so far everything appears to be pointing in the right direction. That's a pretty profound thing for somebody to say, by which I mean if he didn't really believe it was likely to turn out that way, he wouldn't say it. Trending positive. Sometimes the most telling piece of information is what has not been shown. In this case, a remarkable fact is that none of the types of studies I've mentioned have shown a worrisome impact of testosterone on major health areas. We have not yet seen any major study come up with data suggesting that higher levels of T have worrisome health effects. That's very important. We need to let go of the idea that testosterone is illegal, dangerous, and evil. It is not the cause of male violence or aggression. There is little evidence that it increases the risk of heart disease or prostate cancer. In fact, there is growing evidence that it may protect against these conditions. Men who use testosterone medications under their doctor's care as treatment for low T are not cheating or gaining some unfair advantage over coworkers whose T levels are normal. They are simply having their hormone levels restored to normal so that they can reach their full normal potential. Fun fact, testosterone is now one of the preferred drugs of abuse on Wall Street because of its performance-enhancing powers and its ability to help men, particularly, cope with long stretches of work uninterrupted and maintain focus and drive. I'm not endorsing that. I just think it's interesting, right? If the guys on Wall Street have figured out that it works, I mean, they would know if it didn't. Let's be real. All right. At 8 o'clock, I go into the Q&A for the Substack members. For those of you who don't know, I have a Substack blog, stillinmd.substack.com, or you can just Google me, or you can just go to stillinmd.com and get the link to the blog. The members-only Q&A, we're going to be covering stuff that I can't say on these lovely, normal social media channels for reasons that I'm sure you all understand. I will also be opening the floor to questions from my Substack paid audience. The recording will be available later. As you can probably imagine, I'm going to be doing 1 to 2 of these per month. And so there's going to be a lot of these Q&As building up that will be a lot of value for you in the Substack. I'd like you all to know that the Substack proceeds, as well as proceeds from my affiliate marketing, as well as proceeds from supplement sales in my practice. I don't pay myself with those. I apply them towards the treatment of people who otherwise could not afford my services and who I want to help, namely people who have been injured by pharmaceutical products or people who've been injured in the line of duty, protecting me in my soft and comfortable life as a doctor. As always, thank you all for watching. Take care. Have a great day.